All right, so this is Yann Thomas's work, and he's specifically says he's having some issues with color. Um, he's basically repeats here. Basically says it feels like it's washed out when he goes to black and white. It looks balanced, but when it comes to another color, it's a battle. So here's kind of my take on this. First, I'm going to talk about composition. Um, right now, you've kind of got this triangular composition going on. So I see when I look at this, I instinctively see kind of this. Ooh, I got to turn that off, but oops, this triangle composition, which is okay. I think that's fine, but the issue is that it feels very center mass, and things aren't overlapping enough. So let me fix my brush here because I was doing something for somebody else, and you know what? Just let's go transfer. That's what they're playing with. Okay, so let's try this again. All right. Um, there we go. All right. So basically, what I have, what I would say right off the bat is, in order to uh, kind of fix this composition, I would do a little bit more overlapping. Right now, it feels very everything's segregated. The only overlapping you have is in this small section here, and I think that's part of the problem is you don't have enough of the overlapping going on. If you have a little bit more overlapping, what'll happen, I think, is you'll find that um, everything kind of meshes together a little bit more. So what I essentially did was I took your character here and I broke this character down into a couple small sections. Basically, uh, I kind of murdered it here, but I've basically got foreground element here, and then I've got another foreground element here, and I've got the character separated, the girl separated, and the snake character separated, as well as the background. So what I'm going to do is on the snake, the first thing I'm going to do is go here, grab the snake, and let's transform it something along the lines of like this. All right, and I'm going to flatten it a little bit, and we're just basically popping that in there like that, and then I know that kind of screws with your composition, but here now I've got a feeling of, this character is like right in the mix. And then on top of that, I'm going to take this and I'm going to move him up, because what happens is right now, right where he's at now, you're creating a tangent with the floor. And by moving him up, if I get my right layers here, by moving him up, he creates a almost foreground element now. Um, and it gives you a better sense of how he's interacting with that element. All right, so that being said, let me just really quickly. That's why I'm not liking my brush. I'm just really quickly gonna just kind of fill in those dark spots here, and kind of play with, adjust, and like so. So I'm just kind of filling in the spots so that I've got maybe just a little bit of, you know. So that's the first thing I would do is I would adjust him so that it feels like he is um, more in the mix. All right. So that being said, then what I would do is I would adjust her a little bit too. because she's got this sullen look, and you've got a great expression on her, but she's really just kind of there. So what I'm going to do to her is I'm going to leave her the way she is, but I'm going to transform her, and I'm going to kind of put her a little bit more forward and rotate and adjust and break so that now I can go in there and let me just kind of fill in some of this color here. Just kind of roughen this in. Alright, let's put in some of this here. And grab some of these trees. And I would actually get rid of that tree that you have there and maybe kind of build up maybe another branch or something like that. But don't create too many tangents with her. That's what I would basically kind of basically start with. So that being said, then what I would also do is I would grab her face, and we're just going to grab her whole head here, and I would put, it would actually help to actually do, let's do undo, let's go back to her, select transform, and move it up. And instead of having her sullen like she is, instead of having her sullen like she is, by building her up like this, and I would also put in a little bit more of the back side of the breast here, transform it, kind of adjust it. Oops. So I know this is just real rough here, but then I would actually put her eyes open, and her mouth I would have open too, in like that look of surprise. You know, basically like she's paying, you know, she's got interest in this, so she's paying attention. Um, you know, that I'm not going to go into detail and, you know, really clean up the face, but by doing that, it gives her much more interest in the piece, because before she feels very not interested in what's going on, and it's all about story. So we want to add that in there. Then this piece here, what I would do with this tail is honestly make it prominent. I mean, it's this big tail, and you can actually push it in there so that it interacts with her a little bit. And then it's so close, give it a little bit more texture and a little bit more oomph to it. So that's the first thing that I'm going to say right off the bat. So I've just adjusted the composition a little bit to kind of make it feel like it's a little bit more in depth, if you will. A little bit more action. I mean, even this character here, just transforming him a little bit, leaning him into that composition, makes it that much more interesting. So we're just going to go back and let's kind of fill in the head back here and so on. So, but you see how by making the characters interact more, overlapping the characters, you get more sense of depth going on. That's the big thing. And then as you go foreground, background, you've got the right idea. Gets desaturated, gets lighter. But the problem is dark creature, dark character, and then as dark, you know, if not darker. So let's change the saturation on this. Let's lighten her up a little bit, and let's desaturate her a little bit. So she's now not a secondary character, or not a, she's the tertiary character. So by doing that, just that subtlety, it puts her in the background a little bit more. And of course, you can go in with the history brush. This one here. So you can go in with the history brush and kind of, you know, accent a little bit, if you will. And we do not want a line. We want, let's take off shape dynamics, add a little bit. So we can accent this and kind of push highlights in. And this is way too thick. I don't know what's going on with my... Oh, it would actually help to have my pen pressure on, huh? Okay, so let's go back and undo some of that history. And let's... And you can have that saturation in there. Just have to pay attention to what you're saturating. All right. And then the other thing too is you have such a strong, harsh lighting on this side. Why don't you have strong lighting on this side over here? So what I'm going to say right off the bat is let's go into the dodge tool, and I'm just going to use just a subtlety of. And notice I'm using 1% exposure here, because dodge can be dangerous in my opinion. I find that it can be really, 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 really just, it's a great tool, but that's what it is. It's just a tool. It's not a solution. And then looking at her the way she is, her hip is really big, and I get that that you want to have that aspect in there, but you want to have some form into the hip, you know, basically. So that's something I would fix too. And then over here I noticed too, look at the thickness of the two arms, and I'll draw a note here. So the thickness of the two arms here, this is, I get you want to do armor, but looking at this, you've got armor, and then you've got cloth and arm. And I think this arm would be, so you want to build out the bulk here. Shoulder, bicep, forearm, so not as thick, not as in depth as this, because, and then it's breaking here. So you want to thin this arm a little bit. In fact, let's see if we can just grab him, grab this arm here. And select and transform, and let's elongate, and actually let's undo that, and I'm just going to do this real quick here. Layer via cut, select, transform, rotate, and I always find this to be easier. Select, transform, narrow, and then let's rotate, because it's just making life pain in the butt here. So by doing this, and this is something other, I gotta remember how to do, where that is. I don't use it that much. Puppet warp. So I'm going to puppet warp these points here, and then we can say show mesh, and then what I'm going to do is just bend this a little bit, and confirm, and let's go into the underside and paint. Alright, and if you want, you can kind of that didn't work, but we can actually kind of bulk up, but I think that's a better idea. You know, you can't hold straight and do that. So that being said, now let's address the big. Now that we've got the foreground, background, and everything defined, and let me kind of just kind of push this, and this would actually be dark on this side and then light on this side, like so, and then light again over here. So that's another aspect of just general basic lighting. All right, so that's going to help you out a little bit there too. And then on top of that, when you're dumping your colors in, you're going from grayscale um, to with a color overlay or color layer. Now the problem with that is it tends to be very uniform, and I think that's what you're running into, is that uniform aspect. And what I'm going to do, one more thing, just thinking about it, I'm going to go hue saturation, and I'm going to really saturate those colors and really darken that. And actually, let's bring that in there so that you're getting a little bit of, you don't need overlap, but that darkness is really going to push that forward. So now what you've got is you've got the three characters, the desaturated woman, and these two are a little bit more saturated. I would almost even saturate this character and darken it a little bit more, and then again go back into your history brush and set your history state, and then go in, and it's a subtlety thing, but it gives you that aspect of what's going on here. Now, the other aspect is you've got these bright highlights in here, and so you want to sell that. Now, look at, it's almost like a gray. If you're going to saturate it, go up to the next level and give her that, that outline thing, and make it a super bright highlight, and do it on everything. Everything that's especially wet. Um, anything facing that highlight, you want to add that aspect of, that brightness to that character. You can see just by adding those subtle highlights, it's going to really push. It's pushing my character. Now, the other thing too is you might want to try this. Try adding a rim light to it. The rim light will give you, and I'm just going to do a new layer. Let's go with, let's see here. You've got kind of a lot of browns, a lot of reds. So I'm going to go with a cooler blue. And let's just kind of add that rim light and let's say go to soft light now. The overlay. Let's just kind of find my correct. Maybe I just like the normal. So what I would do is get that rim light in there. You see how just, and I'm doing this very haphazardly, but by adding that rim light in there, it really sells more of dimension and form to that character. And let's go here. And maybe even a little bit on there. That type of thing. And that rim light will push that aspect of that character a little bit more in depth. And I think that'll kind of sell and pop your stuff a little bit more. Just kind of adding something like that in there. And you don't want to overdo it, but you don't want to have it, you know, maybe even a little bit on him too, in the foreground and stuff, where it's overlapping. So, like so. And then, you know, maybe even some on the trees here. Depending on what this light source is coming from, it's going to add a little bit more depth to it. And then, I don't know, in my opinion, when you do the overlay stuff, um, I use, I'm going to just do a new canvas here real quick. I'm going to show you. So the problem is when you do an overlay, we're just going to simple ball here. I find that the overlay, and this is my opinion, so, and I know a lot of artists work differently, so this is what I find about the aspect of the gradient. So if I do function foreground fill, oops, no, let's do midtone. Actually, we'll try this. So, and then I do my gradients here, like this, and then let's just put a little bit of a bright, no, that's a little bit too much, let's go back down. And so there's my ball, and then let's reverse this and add in kind of this gray tone here. Nope, just trying to get the right, there we go, I think that's it. I'm just trying to get, I'll have to paint that in there, but so we want that rim light in there. So you've got your object like this, and you first, when you do this, you always want to desaturate the values. Go into image, adjust, or I'm sorry, adjustments, levels, and you actually want the levels to be less black and more grays. And actually we can, and this is how I just adjust it. So, and then let's whites too. So what happens is by doing that, that grayscale value, your colors are going to work a lot better. Let's just cut that. All right, so there's my ball like that. And then the problem is when I do the color overlay, you know, I'm just going to select and new layer, and I think this would be, we'll just say overlay, say OK, foreground fill. So the problem is you get that very saturated look. Now if I take this and I do the same thing, so I'm going to just take my blue ball and do a foreground fill, and actually okay, that's odd. It's not a clipping mask, it's not a quick mask. Oh, it's on overlay. That's why I'm not liking it. Alright, so let's subtract, cut, back to normal. So I've got this on here now. Now, if I take a lighter, darker blue and do in my gradients, take off my reverse here. So if I do my gradients like so, with my darker blue, like that, that gives me a tonal variation between the two. Now if I'm going to go in here and add in my lighter blues like so, because of the light, Now you see the tonal variation between the two. Now it's not 100% perfect, but I'm getting the more saturated colors. I'm getting a value change. I'm getting that aspect of that. What I want to accomplish with that. So when I have people like show me these color things like this, um, you always want to add more to it. So once you're done on this level here, that's when you want to go in and you want to add more color to it. So your saturations and stuff, add a little bit more. Um, let's do a new layer here. So you want to add a little bit more brush here, and just by darkening that and getting that core value, that's going to really help as well. So you really want to pay attention to the lights and the darks and get that contrast in there. Um, and so that's basically kind of what I would do as a whole for your particular thing. I would basically go in there, and this is your version, this is my version. And it's basically just, getting that foreground elements pushed in there, and then paint with more color. Like if you're doing scales, I think I have a scale brush here. Actually, if you're doing scales, it's just a matter of picking the right kind of idea and accenting those ideas. So maybe on this layer I would add, I don't see my scale brush offhand. So here, this will be a good one here. So with the scales, if I was adding chainmail or something like that to this, you don't have to add the chainmail. You just have to give it enough definition that it gives it that color. So here you see how adding that in there adds more texture and more light, and emphasizes your scales and emphasizes everything a little bit more. So like I said, I would add I would change that composition up, and I would desaturate her and get it a little bit more dynamic. And I think your colors are okay. I think they just need more, less blacks and more like darker saturated tones in there to push, your dark colors. So instead of using this as a dark color, um, go in and add in something like this. Let's grab some greens here. So like you've got this green here, and it's purple because I've been playing with it. But if you want those colors in there, it's just adding in that saturation, and that's really what's gonna give you that better color, is the definition of pushing your saturated colors and your unsaturated colors together. All right.